in memory of Dick Robinson and sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services.
Hello, I'm Nikki Grimes, and welcome to the National Book Festival. I am here to talk about legacy, women poets of the Harlem Renaissance, and talk to you a little bit about just writing in general and the joy of books. Before we were women, we were our daddy's daughters, the dark princesses who stole our father's hearts. A single story says they gave us little except disappointment, but ask us. Ask me and I'll chronicle the currency of love Dad splurged on me, the gift of yes, you can, and modeling dignity in the face of vile attacks on his manhood without ever shedding his humanity or surrendering to sorrow. Like many dark fathers, he reclaimed his soul in the sweet strains of music, a lesson we daughters learned, siphon sadness through a song. That poem titled Before is one I wrote with lines borrowed from little-known poet May V. Cowdery. You'll find her in Legacy, Women Poets of the Harlem Renaissance, a companion to One Last Word. Legacy opens with the following poem. Some days I try to hide my new woman body, drape it in shirts 2 sizes too big to keep bug-eyed boys from staring in my direction. Other times I get mad if they don't look. It's worse though when they act like girls ain't nothing. I wish I didn't care either way. Today, Miss Hicks, my teacher, notices me hanging my head, pulls me aside and tells me I need to find my girl power. I roll my eyes. Time you learn a little history. The women in our race have always gone from strength to strength. Let me introduce you to a few women who can teach you what I mean. She hands me 3 books on the Harlem Renaissance. Legacy, like One Last Word, is a collection of poetry written in a new form called Golden Shovel Poetry. In Golden Shovel Poetry, you borrow 1 or more lines from an existing poem and lay the words in the right margin, 1 word at a time, and then create new lines, each ending in one of those words. The length of the new poem depends on the number of words borrowed from the original. For example, if you borrowed 5 words, you'd end up with a new 5-line poem. It's a form designed to stretch your mental muscles, to be sure. That's precisely what I love about it. I'm a glutton for punishment, but only of the literary variety. Poet Terence Hayes created Golden Shovel Poetry to honor the work of one of my literary heroines, Gwendolyn Brooks, in a work titled The Golden Shovel Anthology. Brooks encouraged me early in my career, even writing a blurb for my first book. So I was honored to be one of those anthology's contributors. Once I tried Golden Shovel, I was hooked. I immediately started looking for projects in which I could experiment with this form further. That experiment has led to One Last Word, the picture book story, The Watcher, and now Legacy, my newest Harlem Renaissance title. This female-centered book was a work of pure joy. Research for it led me to a world of wonderful, new-to-me poets like Clarissa Scott Delaney. Joy shakes me like the wind that lifts a sail, wrote Delaney in Joy. I answered with Lay's Reunion. Yearly, I join the celebration of woman joy, the blessing of unchecked tears when calamity shakes us or when beauty surprises, the comfort of sisters cradling me when death slithers into the neighborhood like a rattler, striking yet another sweet sun, the promise of him broken. But there is also the cleansing wind of deep belly laughter as we gather round that love-worn kitchen table, licking morsels of each story that lifts us. Without this maternal crew's guidance, a brown girl like me would simply be adrift. No wind, no sail. I might never have discovered Delaney's joy or my own had I not found her while doing research for this book. Women hold up half the sky, one saying goes, and it's true. And yet, in this world, the enormous value of women expressed in that saying is rarely recognized, let alone celebrated, and the reason is clear. Our stories and the record of our accomplishments are often hidden. We shouldn't be surprised. It's always challenging to find records of the accomplishments of women in general, and Black women in particular, even of those who were writers. Zora Neale Hurston, a prolific writer of the Harlem Renaissance, is a perfect case in point. Hurston is mandatory reading in schools nationwide today, but that's only because Alice Walker rescued her work from history's dustbin. The realm of Harlem Renaissance poetry is no different. Most well-read people can readily tick off the names of poets like Countee Cullen, Paul Laurence Dunbar, and of course, Langston Hughes. However, ask these same readers to cite women poets of the period, and the sound you hear will be crickets. Yet, begin to dig where academics like Maureen Honey and Camille T. Junji have gone before, and you'll meet 20, 30, 40, perhaps 50 women poets of the Harlem Renaissance you never knew existed. In the pages of Legacy, you will meet some of the remarkable female poets and groundbreaking women of the Harlem Renaissance who created alongside of and often nurtured the male poets we know. They didn't all produce poetry collections of their own, but each played an integral part in this historic era in America. And there are so many. I love the work of Angelina Wells Grimke, for example. She wrote short stories, essays, plays, and poetry. With a father who was vice president of the NAACP and aunts who were abolitionists, it's no wonder Grimke wrote unflinchingly about lynchings and all manner of violence against her people. But she also turned her literary attention to love and nature as well. In Legacy, I featured Grimke's short poem, Dusk, which includes the line, "Twin stars through my purpling pain." I took that line as inspiration for my poem titled Vanish. I could vanish were it not for the twin street lights outside my window, imitating stars. Without their brightness, you'd peer through half-open blinds and find barely an outline of my blue-black body, skin purpling toward midnight, my image invisible as a glass pane. Blanche Taylor Dickinson was another poet whose work inspired me. She attended Simmons University, then taught in Kentucky for several years. Her poetry was published in Opportunity, The Crisis, American Poet, Caroling Dusk, and Ebony and Topaz. Though considered a true beauty herself, Dickinson's poems address the pain of Black women who feel invisible and ugly when compared to white standards of beauty. Her themes were powerful and all too familiar. I especially loved her poem, Four Walls, It begins, 4 great walls have hemmed me in, 4 strong, high walls, right and wrong, shall and shan't. And it ends with the lines, 4 walls to rise and pen me in, the conscious world with guarded men. I answered her poem with, what girls can do. Mr. Spencer thinks I don't notice the 4 negative notions he constructs like walls boxing us in. Girls can't, shouldn't, won't, wouldn't. To him, a girl's only purpose is helping a boy rise to his potential, as if girls are devoid of skill and promise. Ha! Men tried putting Shirley Chisholm in a pen, Mae Jameson and Misty Copeland too. Now me? No. I'll decide what I'll be, what box, if any, I fit in. I opened with a poem by Maeve Cowdery, as you recall, and she was one of my happiest finds. Born in Philadelphia, she later moved to New York City to study at Pratt Institute. She was widely published in The Crisis and was one of the few women poets of the Harlem Renaissance to publish a volume of her own work. The book was titled We Lift Our Voices and Other Poems. Encouraged by Langston Hughes and Elaine Locke, Cowdery nevertheless fell off the literary radar after 1936. Before she did, though, she wrote poems like Of Earth, which included the lines, a river is Earth's grief, tears from the hidden wells of her soul. Those lines led me to write the poem, Seeing. A place to row, to fish, scrub a dish, skip a stone, worlds of possibilities reside in a river. Can you see them? For a poor child, lack is often what laps at the feet. It was for me. But earth's scraps were more than evidence of poverty or source of grief to my mother's eyes. Over a pot, she'd slice wild onions, tears streaming, add dandelion greens plucked from patches of weeds outside our door. Toss in the herbs gathered weekly for secret recipes hidden from the family. Then feed us lip-smacking joy. Wells of goodness from humble fare. The casual magic feat of a mother known to redeem corn husks and scraps of cloth, creating her own bits of beauty, routinely envisioned through the eyes of the soul. Finding exciting Black women poets to feature in Legacy was only half my joy. This collection also gave me the opportunity to share poetry that featured Black people engaging with nature, something we rarely get to see in children's literature, which is a space I'd like to help fill. And so I was happy to include poems by Anne Spencer, for whom nature was a favorite topic. She was an avid gardener, and anyone who knows me is aware that I share the same passion. The daughter of former slaves, Anne Spencer served 20 years as librarian for Dunborough High School and helped establish Lynchburg's NAACP. Her poetry appeared in journals like Crisis and anthologies like the Book of American Negro Poetry. And she has the distinction of being the first African-American woman poet featured in the Norton Anthology of Modern Poetry. After Spencer retired, she devoted hours to her garden. One of the poems that blossomed from that time was titled, Earth, I Thank You. I immediately fell in love with the opening lines. Earth, I thank you for the pleasure of your language. Borrowing those lines, I wrote a response titled, Sweet Sister. Clay creatures, we forget our sisterhood with Earth, as if we could survive without her nourishment. I know better, but did I always? I thank her now. Sink your teeth into a peach, and so will you. Imagine a world without rosemary or rose, even for a moment. Where would the flavor or the fragrance be? How we'd miss the quiet pleasure earth brings to nose and tongue, of which we are not worthy. Earth, your generosity deserves to be met with love's language. Throughout the collection, you'll meet Georgia Douglas Johnson, Gwendolyn Bennett, and Jessie Redmond Fawcett, who you might be familiar with, and lesser known poets like Maevie Cowdery, Effie Lee Newsom, and Blanche Taylor Dickinson, along with many more, including Esther Popel, Ida Rowland, Helene Johnson, and Alice Dunbar Nelson, former wife of Paul Laurence Dunbar. These women include some of the first Black female PhDs. They were teachers, librarians, directors of cultural institutions. They hosted art salons and edited some of the very literary magazines and anthologies that featured the work of Cullen, Dunbar, and Hughes, and their female counterparts. Everywhere you look, there is literary gold to be found among women who deserve to be celebrated. I want young readers to know that such women existed. I hope you will be inspired to do a bit of digging on your own. Where do ideas come from is never an easy question to answer. If you ask me how I chose the poets and the poems featured in Legacy, the answer would be no easier, but I can tell you this. In all of the choices I made for this book, I was looking for poems in the past that connected to the present, poems that would resonate with today's young readers. I selected poems with lines that immediately struck me, lines that would sink their hooks into me and never let go. I remember coming across a line in a poem by Gertrude Parthenia McBrown that affected me that way. McBrown held a master's in education from Boston University and was a poet and playwright who directed children's theater and published children's and adult verse. The poem she wrote that demanded my attention was Jehovah's Gesture. This poem had a line that I just couldn't shake. The line was, "A hurricane of souls." I found myself repeating it over and over again, like a meditation or a mantra. I tried to glean what it might mean and why it had such a pull on me. A hurricane of souls. Finally, one morning, I woke up with that line in my head like an earworm and suddenly understood who those souls were. They were the souls of the children living in cages at the Mexican border. Souls caught in the hurricane, trapped in the storm. That's who those souls were to me. As soon as I understood that, I was able to write a poem titled Judgment. Caged innocence. We study the heavens for a lightning bolt of justice, a hurricane of grace towards parents whose sole sin is love of us and freedom. Our sin? Being labeled disposable souls. Current events drove my choices for Legacy in other ways as well. I remember going on the hunt for a line or verse that would link me to the subject of climate change, a major issue of our time. I certainly experienced the effects of it living in Southern California, where unusually high temperatures and endless droughts have led to the deadliest wildfires the state has ever seen. A line in a poem by Angelina Weld Grimke took me where I wanted to go. Her poem is titled At the Spring Dawn, and it includes the line, "And the red sun shouldered his way up." It immediately made me think of the ozone layer. And so I wrote the poem, Faithful. The punctured ozone layer bleeds radiation, and we offer complaint without apology for the years of desecration Earth has suffered. Red is no longer the color of jubilation, but warning. The sun will now allow wildfires to run rampant. Nature shouldered the brunt of man's mistreatment too long. Now it's his turn to pay. Even so, it is the way of creation to be faithful. Notice, each dawn, the sun comes up. Whether we talk about climate change or social justice, the themes that Spencer and the other poets in Legacy wrote about have as much resonance now as they did when they were first written. Poems like Esther Popel's Flag Salute, a dark commentary on the Pledge of Allegiance, certainly strike a chord. This poem could have been written today with a special dedication to Colin Kaepernick. I responded with A Mother's Lament. Ancestral blood waters cotton fields and the earth I stand on. A history begun under lash. No pledge of liberty until war forced it. My people's allegiance to country was wrung from hearts of hope to one day be treated equal to the sons of the ones who shipped us naked to these shores under freedom's flag. Legacy is only the beginning of my exploration into this subject matter. This book was not big enough to include all of the wonderful Black women poets I discovered, but it's a start. As often happens with research, the more you look, the more you find. Along the way, I met new poets, which was exciting in and of itself, but I also encountered the origins of poetry and fiction for young Black readers, something I never expected to find. Of course, that only means I'll need to go back at some point and root around for more literary nuggets to play with. Legacy offers a wealth of entry points teachers and parents will be happy to discover. Possible discussion topics include race, identity, social justice, equity, women's rights, immigration, climate change, and of course, the Harlem Renaissance. Legacy is a perfect place to spark conversation, laugh a little, cry a little, and learn something along the way. I'll end with Legacy's closing poem, Journey's End. I turn the final page of the final book, swallowing each word of wisdom. I breathe deep and feel something soft but strong brushing once knobby shoulder blades, a quiet unfolding of feathery limbs emerging from bone and skin. I thank Miss May, Miss Angelina, Miss Anne, and all the others for these new and mighty glistening things called wings. They lift me from the smallness of others' expectations, reminding me that I am more than anyone gives me credit for. I grew up, at the time I grew up and in the neighborhoods I grew up in, when you talked about wanting to be a writer, I talked about wanting to be a writer as a career, and I wanted to write books, and people would laugh and say, writers don't come from around here. You want to do what? And it was because that idea really is true. You know, if you can see it, you can be it. And there weren't any authors walking around in our neighborhoods. And so people couldn't imagine that that was something you could become. And it was very helpful for me when one of my teachers started giving me books written by Black authors so that I could see that, yes, this is something I could be. This is someone I could become. And what she would do is sneak the books in my backpack, my book bag, and I would find them like hidden treasure when I got home. And she was the first one who introduced me to the work of James Baldwin, who later became very important in my life. So that was definitely a book that opened my world in a major way. A few years ago, I wrote Ordinary Hazards, a memoir. And the reason I wrote that story is because I've always believed that the single most important story you have to tell is your own. Every single person has a story to tell. And someone needs the story that only you can tell. They'll benefit from it, they'll grow from it. It's important that you tell your story, whether you do so in a poem or in a novel or in an essay or in a memoir, or you tell your story visually in a painting or a drawing. There are lots of ways to communicate, but your story matters. Someone needs the story that you have to tell. So tell it.